We're going to think about a moment in the past. We're going to think about a moment that took place quite some time ago, but we're going to enter into that moment through a work of art. And we're going to explore that work of art, and we're going to think about the kinds of questions that we have about it. And then we're going to look at some other materials from that moment in time. And then we're going to deepen our questions about that moment in time. And then we're going to come back to our own moment today and think about how those questions might reframe our own lives, our own world, and our own experiences today. Our first step is to look. So we're just going to spend a moment, maybe 30 seconds, looking in silence. And I want you to just spend some time looking at the painting. Don't worry about what it says over here on the label. We want to open our minds to what the artist has given us. So just spend time looking at the object, looking at the painted surface. You might get up and you might want to walk around a little bit to see if you can see it from a different place. So go ahead. So we're going to, just to get us started in sharing and talking about what we saw, we're going to go around and I'd like everyone to just name that first thing that really grabbed your attention.
I first noticed the way that everything in the painting seems like sort of linear, except it's like crowded towards the front.
I do get an immediate sense of tension. Something's happening.
Okay.
I say the person in the middle that's coming through the door, because it's like he's coming at me too, and like everybody's energy is focused towards him. So
the first thing I noticed was the knife kind of pointing at his eye. It looks like the knife is like poking his eye from this angle, because his other eye's open, but the other one's like slightly closed. It could be swollen, but since the colors in the painting are so dark, I can't really tell.
The way that the artist positioned him, it feels like the way he's standing, it's such a commanding presence. And then the rest of the people all kind of have more subservient movements.
For the man at the top, what I really noticed about him is the look on his face. He seems very disconnected from what's going on, and he's kind of just looking straight ahead.
Yeah, he's sort of not,
He's like physically there, but not mentally there.
Yeah. He's sort of not taking notice.
Like aloof.
He's aloof.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, yeah, he's aloof. One of the ways that might help us dig a little bit deeper into thinking about the connections and how we understand the connections between these figures is for us to actually take on these poses, these positions. Are you all willing to give that a try? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So I think there are 7 of you, and there are 5 figures in the painting. So we'll have 5 of you do it, and then 2 of you can play director and make sure that we're moving in the right place. What are you feeling?
I feel very disconnected. I can't I can't really see what's going on at all here. But the person in the painting is probably like keeping watch or something, I would say, or maybe there's something chaotic going outside that they're observing that's even more chaotic than in the painting.
Okay.
This is uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable, yeah.
Yeah. I think that we are struggling with something that they're doing because they clearly have more of the power, and we're like making ourselves uncomfortable just to kind of like get a message out to them. It feels like.
I want to recognize that each one of you saw something slightly different. And that's very common, that we sit down and look at something and we experience it in different ways. And this is the same thing with things that happen in our lives, things that happen in history, that everyone who was part of it experienced it in a slightly different way. And together today, we can bring the collective observations that we have together and build some new meaning and some new understanding in a way that may be deeper than if we were to do it on our own. What new questions do you have now that you've done this?
I have a lot.
You have a lot? Okay, tell me.
Like, I wonder, like, why is one person looking out? Like, are they watching out for something? Or like, you know how like when you're gonna do something bad and you're trying to kill somebody, you're gonna try to see so you won't get caught.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if that's
Yeah.
Like, it's not really a question, but more of a like new understanding from like being in that position. Maybe the way that it was painted, like how close it was, is like on purpose to like make you not really understand what's going on. Like you don't know who has the knife or why their arms are up or why there's like this kind of protective thing that you guys were talking about and what it's protecting from. And so it kind of gives this like ambiguity to what's happening and also to like the intent of the figure in the background.
Okay. So we have questions about just simply what's happening here. We want to know more about who the individual figures are. We have a lot of questions about the figure at the top. And that's something that is an important question that we can begin to dig into maybe a little bit more if we get some context on this painting.
I want context.
You want context. You're at that place now. Okay. The name of the painting is Zapata. It was painted in 1930. And it was painted by Jose Clemente Orozco, who was a Mexican artist. He was in art school and finishing art school just at the very beginning of the Mexican Revolution. So this is a very chaotic time in Mexican history. And the figure that is portrayed here, Zapata, Emiliano Zapata, was one of the leaders of these revolutionary factions. And he and his soldiers would just take the land back. And they would be working in the fields and they would have their weapons, and if they were called to fight, they would fight. He was seen as somewhat ruthless, but he was also seen as someone who was very committed. His motto was land and liberty, or land and freedom, and he was very committed to the freedom of these people.
I learned a little bit about who Zapata was, and I know that he had a lot of enemies. So now that I'm like putting like everything like in context and stuff, I'm thinking like people in like in the bottom, they're like the peasants, the ones that he was trying to like help. I have a feeling that the enemies, which are the other two figures that have the sombreros, they're the ones that are like you can't help them no more.
I was just gonna say that I think the new information that we got, it almost made it harder to figure out because it started making me think of all these other options that could be creating the tension in this painting than what I just initially thought.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot more, I don't know, like intricate relationships that could be going on between the figures.
Yeah, that's an important point that there is a level of complexity. The Mexican Revolution is complex. And there's so many more details that we don't have at our fingertips right now that we could look at that would help us consider this. And in fact, that's what happens when we look at history, or we look at any event, whether it's happening today or in the past, is that it's never simple, right? It's actually quite complicated. And the painting gives us an opportunity to begin to establish, it draws on our emotions, it draws on our senses, it draws us in visually, it gives us an opportunity to ask some initial questions, and then we have some grounding, some footing to begin to consider that new information. But it's still complex, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's keep getting more complex, all right? And then I want to dig into some other sources from around 1930 that are also looking back at the revolution and see if we can't dig a little deeper into the way this whole thing unfolded and the legacy of this very important but very turbulent time in Mexican history. Sound okay? Yeah? So this is a print, not a painting, but a print by Diego Rivera, one of the other major Mexican artists of this time. This is also Zapata. So let's look at this and look at the painting and think about some of the things that we notice here that are similar or different.
Like I have a feeling here, it's like he's showing them like, oh, a south side.
Okay.
And so he's like going against it, like, yeah, I have like a south side, but I'm still like a revolutionary.
Okay.
I feel like when you would kill someone, you do get a sense of power.
Yeah.
So I feel once the revolution progressed, he like had killed so many people that he felt entitled and felt so empowered with it, which is why he's different. Here, he's more with the people, and there he looks like he's more in control and more like above everyone.
Okay.
Because he has all that power that he had from like killing people and taking the land. Like he's following his motto.
Yeah. In the years of the revolution, he had somewhat mixed reputation because some people saw him as ruthless and very violent in his tactics, but others very much celebrated what he was able to do for those that were oppressed. In the years following the revolution, he became kind of an icon, a mythological figure in a way. He was assassinated in 1919 towards the end of the violent period of the revolution and rose to the status as this kind of hero, and many artists chose to portray him. So this is a moment that's getting you to think a little bit about what does it mean to be a revolutionary? So I want to take one last quick different perspective on the revolution. This is an excerpt from a novel that was written by a woman named Nelly Campobello, who grew up in the northern part of Mexico. So not the area dominated by the Zapatistas, but the area actually dominated by another one of the revolutionaries, Pancho Villa. And it was called Cartucho, Tales of the Struggle in Northern Mexico. So we're going to just read one small excerpt from that, okay? And think about what additional information that gives us.
General Agustin Garcia had intended to carry Irene off, but instead he picked up the guitar and began to sing. Proud dark-haired girl, I'll not see your face again. And one foot swinging in the air, he finished a cigarette and a cup of coffee.
What do you notice in this? Did anything stand out to you?
It gives like a 360 view of the conflict and like the different lives that existed within that context.
Orozco, as not just as a painter, but as a human being, lived through this. So did Rivera. Nelly Campobello, who wrote this, experienced this. And this is an important point that takes us back to the painting, which is that these three sources give us not simply one view in that, but help us understand that or reckon with that complexity and bring greater awareness to it. So what are our remaining questions? What are these things that we're wondering about, whether it's about Zapata individually, but we can take them even to this bigger set of questions about the nature of conflicts like this. What are some of the things that are standing out for you?
Like basically like is this still almost happening like to this day?
Yeah. So I think it also ties in with how corrupted the government was in Mexico back then, and how still today, to this day, there's still corrupt politicians over there, and there's corrupt politicians here also. So
we didn't necessarily have resolution around what this figure of Zapata means, and I don't know that we will. But it prompted us to investigate this with a new lens. The idea of revolution, the idea of being a leader in a revolution, the idea of experiencing a revolution, and then living in the period beyond it and continuing to reckon with it and contend with it and trying to understand it, which is something that happens today, has happened in other times in history, and will probably continue to happen.
What's so striking about this process for students is that they discover the knowledge.
Gives students the opportunity to really delve deeply into what it is we're studying.
Becoming aware of your own questions is part of the great challenge. This is the key advantage of this approach, that students are able to suddenly become aware of their own thinking.
It has to be deep, it has to be rich, and you can't do that with just a textbook. It has to be layered through a multitude of sources, and that's what this program does.
That had them thinking about the complexities of revolutions in their own moment as well as in the past. So that depth occurred, but it was all really led by their own inquiry, which is the great power of this exercise.
They're the ones internalizing the work they're seeing. They're the ones that are going out and then applying that to other readings and making their own connections, which I would argue are much deeper connections than me providing to you what I want you to think. Because after they leave my class, I want them to be totally, independent thinkers. I want them to be able to decipher what they hear on the news and call what is BS and what is not, what is truth, what is not. And that's only through their thinking. I can't tell them that. If I tell them that, then they're not thinking. And that's what I want. I want real citizens who can think, who can judge for themselves. That's my job.
Awesome.